Zenith error, my favorite. We talked about already that we align the cantilever because that's what we can see, but that's not what matters because the cantilever doesn't read the groove. And if you see,
this is what I got.
what's that?
I don't know what did you just
somebody unmuted their mic. I'm going to mute it. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
And so in this image here, you'll see that not only is the diamond block, which is, let me put this on again. This is the diamond block. Okay. That not only is that slightly misaligned to the cantilever, but the stylus itself is misaligned within the diamond block. But the part that matters is right here. That's the only thing I care about. So when I take these images, I don't care about the margins of the stylus shank. I care about this. Okay. Kind of a low resolution image, but so how does zenith error create a problem for optimizing your playback? Three things, and I'll illustrate this in some drawings. Incomplete excursion, meaning if the groove offers freedom of movement left, right, 5 microns, it's not going to go that far. It will go 4 microns or something less. Tracing error, I'll show you what that means, and pinch effect, I'll show you. All right, so here's a very crude drawing of how a cutterhead forms a groove. Cutterheads typically have about a 2 micron sharp edge, and they go zigzag, zigzag, and they cut the groove. Right now, we're going to start out looking at a conical stylus profile. So this is a top-down illustration of if you have a conical stylus, how is it going to travel through the groove? Well, the first thing you notice, it's got this incomplete excursion. The stylus will not reach all the way, and this is an exaggerated view, but it's so you can understand the principle. The stylus won't reach all the way over to the bottom of the groove. So it's not reading all of the signal. Okay, next, tracing error. So tracing error means that the left channel signal and the right channel signal are out of phase with each other. They're reading the groove differently in time. Now this is very small, and it's most noticeable, most measurable and noticeable at higher frequencies only, and it's only in the single digits of phase error in the high frequencies only. But it's just one of 3 situations that tracing error causes. Next thing, there's vertical modulation. This is the big one. You notice how this contact pattern of on the bottom, the contact pattern on the groove of the stylus shape, the spherical stylus shape at the bottom, is larger than the other 2. Well, that represents the fact that the stylus has to bounce in and out of the groove in order to trace an otherwise perfectly horizontal groove, because it's not the same shape as the cutterhead. So ellipticals improve upon this, but they still have the same problems, just to a lesser degree. They still have the same the incomplete excursion, tracing error, and pinch effect. Now, a fine line contact stylus profile is, just for all intents and purposes, very, very similar or almost the same as a cutterhead stylus. But if it's exhibiting a zenith error, it starts to behave like an elliptical or a spherical if it's really bad. What's happening here is that now this misaligned fine line contact stylus on its zenith is getting pinched. It cannot make its way through this groove any longer unless it comes upward. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I'm really fortunate to have a partner who's a mechanical engineer of the highest order, and he's got a huge team of people behind them with lots of resources, and we can get a lot of stuff done. And we have access to fantastic equipment, and in this case, amazing software. So this is an animation that was done in a finite element analysis software, which, if you can get it, is about $25,000 a year or so. And so here's what we got. On the left, we've got a stylus that's perfectly oriented in the groove. And on the right, we've got one with zenith error. Okay. Now the groove is, these grooves are identical on the left and the right, and the grooves have just two sine waves in them, about 3,500 hertz and about 6,500 hertz. Okay. And it's horizontally modulated only. There's no vertical content to these grooves. So I'm going to play the video, and I want you to watch these springs that are above the XYZ axis, as well as watching the action of the styling. So again, the gray represents the stylus contact edge. And on the left, you're seeing it just go left, right, left, right, left, right. And the one on the right, it's pretty obvious, particularly when you look at that spring. It's going in an ovular pattern. There's no vertical content to this groove. And when I saw this, I just, we had inferred that this was probably the case. And then when we made this 1001 scale stylus, we saw it was happening with this 1001 scale stylus. And I thought, well, that's not enough. Let's prove it. Let's prove it mathematically. So we've even got a formula for it now too. And there's a formula that defines the vertical action in an otherwise horizontally modulated groove given a certain zenith error and a whole host of other variables. But so problem is, and this is the part that makes me uncomfortable, I don't know of any other way to measure zenith error right now unless you send it to me, because nobody's measuring for it. I know that the stylus manufacturers can, and I know that they don't always. Like, for example, there's one, I won't name it. I know that one major one in Japan, they've got the production department and then the measuring department. And the measuring department can measure for zenith error. But the cartridge manufacturers who are purchasing these stylus cantilever assemblies have to pay extra for their stylus cantilever assemblies to go to the measuring department. And then, even though they're going to the measuring department, they are still not guaranteed anything tighter than plus minus 5 degrees error. Now, in order to measure zenith error, I had to get a microscope that costs more than my car. And I find that unacceptable, that such expense has to be made, it has to be paid in order to accomplish this. We are working on two different product paths, two totally different product paths to make a way for people to be able to measure it on their own. And I have been in discussions with more than one cartridge manufacturer, helping them put together a microscopy program. This stuff is measurable, but it's difficult to measure. You can see zenith error with a decent microscope, but measuring it is a whole other matter. Okay. But there is a way to subjectively test for zenith error. The evaluation material, here's what, as far as I know, only Chad, Cassim, and in the older days, Classic Records made the same high quality pressing in both 33 and 45. If you have that situation where you've got the same production from the same production house in both 33 and 45, you have an opportunity to test subjectively for potential zenith error. Classical orchestral is what I recommend to use, because the complexity of the groove content, the complexity of the instrumentation, and the big sound field and lots of depth gives you the best chance of being able to discern any zenith era issues. So you would start out using 35 RPM version and only the innermost track. Okay, so 33 RPM, innermost track, listen to it, and then find that same track on the 45 RPM. Doesn't matter where it is on the 45 RPM, but those are the two to compare. And you're going to listen for, and these are the subjective impacts of a zenith era. Soundstage will shrink. Front to back instrumentation layering starts to disappear. Image specificity suffers. So instead of having pinpoint imaging, they're kind of diffuse. Overall sense of musical intelligibility and coherence definitely suffers. High frequency decay. So, you know, that cymbal splash, instead of having this nice long decay, it's truncated. And then the dynamic slam suffers as well. These are all the subjective impacts of zenith era. Okay. We're getting near the end, and then I look forward to the questions. So a quick run over of univariate versus multivariate testing. Univariate testing is when you assess data involving input from only one variable. This is the simplest form of analyzing data. It's the most reliable way of analyzing data, and microscopy is an example. Just measure it directly, okay? Multivariate, however, this is a situation where you involve a number of independent variables where you only care about one, but other variables are going to affect the data collected. And I gave you an example earlier, measuring azimuth for your ideal azimuth angle when you're measuring crosstalk. The figures you get, and ultimately the angle at which you set your ideal azimuth, are going to change depending on your zenith, right? So and so it becomes a real iterative process. It's time consuming, and you'll never really know if you got it right. You'll never, the removal of doubt is pretty much an impossibility of whether you've isolated it to the ideal, your parameter that you currently care about, if you've isolated it to your ideal approach angle. Okay. And it's of course test record specific. I mean, you're trusting that the Cutterhead, because you're using a test record, you're trusting that the engineers got it spot on. So I don't like multivariate testing. Azimuth is the one test where we can't get away from it. Okay, skating and anti-skating force. I honestly don't understand the controversy. I don't understand why there's a controversy of, one, whether it's important to have anti-skating or not, and two, how much to apply. So coefficient of friction tests were done in the 50s and 60s by a number of different outfits. Those papers are still out there, available to read, mostly on Journal of Audio Engineering Society. And they all agree with each other that they confirm that about 10% of your VTF should be applied to anti-skate force for most musical playback, on average, right? Now, of course, skating forces is a product of a few different things, and coefficient of friction is one of them. There are a number of other variables as well. But on average, 10%. I recently saw a video that was sent to me. It was from Russia, and it was in Russian. It got translated. A guy had set up this really interesting experiment using a water basin and a tone arm floating on the water basin, and he was measuring the frictional effects of the playback. And so Andre, my partner, and I, he gave enough information that we could do the calculations, and we determined he found the same thing as the guys in the 50s and 60s. 10% of your VTF is going to keep things steady. Anti-skating, when you don't set it properly, it guarantees incorrect zenith alignment. And in free rolling unipivots, I suspect, but I haven't measured this yet. Nintendo. I've got one right here. I believe it may also change azimuth. I'm going to show you a video. Okay, see this video. Watch. It's of a Soundsmith cartridge. And you'll notice the record stops and it starts. But look at the cantilever angle at static and dynamic. Look at that angle change. You see that? Okay. You saw that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So we measured it, 2.4 degrees. That's 2.4 degrees. Now, your cantilever angle just changed 2.4 degrees. So you've spent all this energy and effort. Of course, this is horizontal compliance of the cartridge is going to change this, and of course groove amplitude and all that stuff. But this is just one cartridge, and I've done 2 of these, and they're roughly the same. So I wasn't cherry picking for the softest cartridge as a Soundsmith. So you go through all this effort to align your cantilever very well with your protractor, preferably Wally tractor, and you don't apply anti-skating at all. And as soon as you start the record, boom, your efforts are off by, in this case, 2.4 degrees. Done. Why bother? So skating, it's more than just about preservation of the stylus, because your stylus will wear out faster in the left channel if you do not have an anti-skate force. All right. So there's the question, right? Before aligning the cantilever at null points, how do you know your tone arm is going to play nice? So, well, actually, it's a different question. So a lot of tone arms, unbeknownst to the owner, especially this is particularly the case with many free rolling unipivots, have horizontal forces native to the arm. And I'm talking about when anti-skating is off completely. That's pushing the arm one way or the other. Okay, and that's what the Wally skater, one of the things that the Wally skater is good for, is to measure, is your arm pushing one way or the other? Because if it is more than about 5-6%, if it's pushing on its own one way or the other, then when you drop your stylus down to the protractor to align it, what's your tone arm going to? I'm going to stop share for. When you drop your stylus down to the protractor, what's it going to do? It's going to do this. Boom. Yeah, right? As soon as that vertical tracking force is applied, it's going to boom. And now, when you're looking at it from the front, it looks like you need to rotate the cartridge to get it into position. But you just screwed up your zenith now, because the problem wasn't the offset angle. The problem was the cartridge is being pushed over by internal forces. Now, those internal forces, what are they? Almost always, it's tone arm wires have been twisted incorrectly or too much, right? But if you don't know it exists by measuring it, then aligning your cantilever, it's going to be off. If you do know it exists, then there is a trick to eliminate it. Well, of course, the first thing is to try to redress the wires if you can. But sometimes it's a bad bearing. I think I'm pretty much done here. Oh, yeah, I think this is the last slide. So what is not the sound of misaligned styles? So sometimes people will call me and they'll say, hey, it doesn't happen very often, but once in a while I get a call saying, I just realigned the stylus according to the Wally tractor and set everything up with the tools, and I can tell it sounds really, really great. But on high frequencies, I'm getting some distortion, some sibilance. Misalignment and my answer every time is, this has nothing to do with alignment. You've revealed another problem. Okay, and the problem I find about 50% of the time is they've been using the gel cleaners, and they need to get that off. About 50% of the time. But 30% of the time, they've got their tone arm is as either their anti-skate is way off, or it's not enough, or there's something going on with horizontal forces in their tone arms that need to be fixed. And other times, what it is. So now remember, when you realign the stylus, you can actually change the height at which the stylus reads the groove. All right, it might be reading higher, it might be reading lower. So on a very rare occasion, what they're reading is previously damaged grooves that they were missing before because they were riding higher or riding lower. That's very rare. And the way to check it is to have, bring it over to a friend's or try another record of the same type or whatnot. It's very rare, but that happens too. That is it.
All right. So before I open it up to everyone else, just a couple of simple questions about what you do at home. So like I have Stylus, Blue Tack, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, a little brush that came with a cartridge. I have a lens brush, and I have one of those vibrating brushes.
Yes.
What do you clean your stylus with?
Okay, so I love the dry brushes. I do that before every record side. And every 1 or 2 weeks, I'll put 1 drop of fluid on there. And I'm kind of fluid agnostic right now, and give it a wet clean. I prefer to stay away from, well, definitely prefer to stay away from solvents and alcohol. Okay. I mean, I've got a variety of different things here I'm trying, but I'm not putting any effort into determine, at least not yet, determining what I like best. I don't know what I like best. The Blue Tack, I get a lot of respect for Peter Letterman, and Peter Letterman has seen a lot of styly up close and personal in his microscopy. If he says that the Blue Tack doesn't leave any residue, I'm inclined to believe him, right? But the concern about the gel cleaner in particular, Onzo's, I wonder if it's breaking down with UV exposure or whatnot. I have not tested a fresh one. I've been getting clients samples come in of other cartridges, and I've just been seeing a lot of it.
So whatever the cause, it's a potentially dangerous way to clean your stylus, or not, certainly not optimum.
Yeah. I don't think it'll ruin a stylus, but I'm quite sure that it's depositing its material into your grooves. Because the only part of the stylus that's ever always clean is the contact edges.
So one other question, this is kind of a off topic a little bit, but your personal front end, can you describe it from cartridge to phono stage? What do you use at home?
Cartridge, I'm blessed to have a number of different ones from good people in the industry. I'm really enjoying the Hanawas. I really enjoy them. The Lyras are always fantastic. The Atnor, the Atlas, very different cartridges than the Hanawa. All right, and so I play with those, and there's a number of others that I really like, but those are my areas, my 2 areas of focus. On my main rig, it's a Kuzma 4-point on an SNE 30, which sits on top of a -K platform. That feeds Passlabs XP25.